A couple of years ago, I went on a road trip to the Grand Canyon with my best friend Samantha. It was about a 12-hour drive, but it would be worth it. We had always wanted to go see the Grand Canyon, and we thought the drive would be pretty interesting along the way. The plan was to make the entire drive in one day down there. We left early, and it would be easy, especially since there were two of us, and we could take turns driving. We ended up leaving at 7 a.m., and I started out driving. Things went well for the most part. We stopped a few times for gas and food. We also switched driving every couple of hours or so. At one point, probably about 7 or 8 hours into the drive, we left a gas station, and not long after, Samantha said that the car behind us was following us. I had just changed to driving, and I was unaware of this. When I was in the passenger seat, I would just be on my phone and wasn't really paying too close attention to our surroundings. I asked how she knew that, and she told me that the car had been behind us for a while when she was driving, even changing lanes with us a couple of times. Of course, she wasn't sure, but when we stopped and the car did as well, and then when we left, the car left at the same time, she thought that it was really suspicious. I said maybe it was just a coincidence, and we agreed that it could be. I looked at the car in the mirror as I drove. It was a white four-door sedan, pretty average looking. I couldn't make out who was driving or anything like that. I stayed in the right lane for most of the time, and the car stayed behind us. We mostly ignored it, and none of us were 100% sure if we were being followed, but it did seem a little strange. About an hour went by, and the car was still behind us. I had switched lanes a few times to pass slower cars and things like that, and I also kind of forgot about the car behind us. But when I remembered again, I noticed that it was still there. It was a decent ways back. It wasn't like it was right on our bumper. Samantha told me to take the next exit, and we would see once and for all if the car was following us for some reason. About 5 minutes later, the next exit came up, and I took it. The car behind us did as well. We were now starting to panic. I wasn't sure what to do. I drove down the road for a ways, and then Samantha told me to take the next right. When I did, the car behind us did also. I started to then take random turns, left and right. Whatever I did, the car did as well. I have no clue what city we were even in. It wasn't quite the middle of nowhere, but it wasn't very big either. There were a few businesses here and there, and eventually I drove into a neighborhood. I was turning so often that finally the car behind us stopped following. We took a turn and the car kept going straight. At that point, I looked at our GPS again and we headed back towards the freeway. We were both so glad that the car stopped following us and we could finally not worry about it anymore. We made it to the Grand Canyon that night. We stayed in a nearby town in Arizona for 2 nights and then headed back home. On the day that we were driving back home, probably about midway through the drive, I saw a white car behind us again. Samantha and I joked about the car being back and following us once more. We were 100% joking because we knew how common of a car that was. There was no chance it was the same one. But about 30 minutes went by and the car was still behind us. We needed to get gas and took an exit. When we did, the car followed us. That's when I got a bad feeling again. What if this was the same car? We got to a larger gas station where there were a decent number of other cars. It looked like a popular stop for people making road trips. I drove the car to a gas pump and then got out. We noticed that the white car did not get gas, but parked in the parking area. Samantha kept an eye on the car as I pumped the gas. When I was done, I got back inside, and Samantha told me that nobody had gotten out of the car. We both kind of had to use the bathroom, and decided to get out and use the bathroom in the gas station. But as we were walking inside, we heard a car door open and shut behind us, and looked to see a man stepping out of the white car. Both at the same time, Samantha and I ran back for our car and got inside. We saw the man start to return to his car as well. I got in the driver's seat, started the engine, and then drove out of the parking lot as fast as I could. The white car behind in the parking lot had a farther distance to go to take the exit that we were taking. The guy had to wait for a semi-truck that was entering, and we were able to get away. When we got back onto the freeway, I drove until the first exit and then took that, so the car couldn't catch up to us. We waited at another gas station for a while, and then left again. After that, we didn't see the car for the rest of the trip. Samantha and I still talk about this all the time. I can't believe how we were followed twice by the same person. Sometimes I wonder if we had been followed the entire time without noticing. This is something that happened a long time ago. I went on a road trip to visit some family. It was a pretty long trip and would take me about 10 hours. My plan was to do the whole drive in a day. Well, I had made it in about 8 hours and was now driving at night. With just about 2 hours to go, my car broke down. I was on this one road that was not a highway, but a little bit quieter. I could see the light dimming in my car, and I knew that something was wrong. Then I started to lose power. Soon I could not drive the car anymore, and it went slower and slower until it stopped along the side of the road. There were hardly any other cars out driving anymore at this hour. So then I got on my phone, and I called my roadside service AAA. I told them what happened, and they said they would send somebody to my location, but it may take a little while. I figured that my battery had died, and I didn't know exactly why. I couldn't turn any lights on inside of the car or anything, so I just went on my phone. I hoped that the roadside service would get there quickly, but I figured that it would probably take at least 30 minutes. I mean, I was not in a very populated area. So about 5 or 10 minutes into waiting, I saw headlights coming up behind me. I hoped that it was roadside service until I noticed that it was just a sedan. I knew that roadside service would be in a truck of some sort, but the car slowed down as it got closer and then pulled over to the side of the road behind me. I was wondering who this was and what they were doing. For a while, the car's lights stayed on and the engine remained running. Then it turned off. The driver's door opened and I saw a man walk out. He started going towards the passenger side of my car. I also thought this was odd and would have figured that he would go to my window or something. The man ended up walking straight from my passenger side. Before I really knew what was going on, he reached my rear passenger side door. Then he tried opening it. I couldn't believe it. I had no idea what to do, so I just took my keys and tried starting the engine again. And unbelievably, it started up. I didn't waste any time and I drove away from him and out of there. I went until the next exit and took it to a gas station. Then I called the police and my roadside service and told them what was going on. Luckily, my roadside service really wasn't that far away. I was able to wait for them at the gas station. Things ended up working out and I never saw that guy again or his car. I still wonder what that guy was doing though. Back when I was in college, I went to a school that was a really long ways from home. Every semester, I would make the long road trip halfway across the country to go to school and get back home. One semester, I was traveling home for the summer. I would often have some pretty late nights on my drives. I would either stop at a hotel or just sleep in my car. On this particular time, it was the second night of my trip and probably around midnight when the gas light on my car went on. I knew I would run out soon, so I stopped at the next exit to look for gas. However, there were no gas stations immediately off the freeway, so I pulled over to the side of the quiet road that I was on and searched gas on my phone. There was a place like 5 miles down the road I was on, so I decided to go there rather than the next place, which was 10 miles down the freeway. I drove down the road and only saw a couple of other cars. Finally, I arrived at the gas station, which was very quiet and a really old-looking place. I got out and filled my tank. And I got back in my car and started to head back towards the freeway. But as I was leaving the parking lot to the gas station, a car came in at a really high speed and almost ran into me. It had to come just about a foot away. It was a really close call. I didn't know why the person was driving so reckless, but I just shook my head and kept driving. Then I noticed in my mirror the car violently turn around in the gas station parking lot and come back around to the road that I was on. The car started to follow me. I drove back maintaining the speed limit, and the car quickly was right on my tail. I wondered what this guy's problem was. I pulled to the side of the road to let him by, but he stayed on me. He followed me all the way back to the freeway. We both got onto the freeway, and he remained behind me for almost 10 minutes. I was getting really creeped out and wasn't sure what to do, but just then, finally, the car suddenly pulled out from behind me and went to pass me on the right side of the road. As it got lined up with me, I looked to see who was driving, but I saw nobody in the car at all. It was completely empty. My jaw dropped when I saw this. The car then sped past me, and I immediately looked at the license plate, but the car didn't have any license plates on at all. I was completely freaked out. I slowed down to let the car get out of my sight. Ever since this has happened, people don't believe me when I tell them the story, and I can't blame them. I probably wouldn't believe it either. Maybe there was some kind of explanation for this, but I know that nobody was in that driver's seat at all. This happened when I was younger. My family went on a road trip to visit my grandparents. We made this trip several times, and during this one, I was probably about 12. It was about a 5-hour drive to get there, so we were able to do the entire drive in one day, but as a kid, it felt so long. During this trip, about 3 hours into the drive, we needed to get gas, so we stopped at a gas station. I had to use the restroom, but nobody else needed to, so I got out and went inside the store. I remembered that after I went inside and used the bathroom, I looked around a couple of aisles to see if there was anything that I wanted. My mom had told me that if I wanted to get something, I could. As I looked around in one of the snack aisles, I noticed this one guy just staring at me. The guy was sort of short and sort of chubby, but aside from that, I don't remember much. I didn't really know what he was doing, but I soon walked into the next aisle over. Soon, I saw the man there as well. It just kind of gave me a bad feeling, and I decided not to get anything and just to leave. I walked out and left the store and went back to our car. I got back inside and waited for my dad to finish. He was now cleaning the windows with those window cleaners they have at the gas station. After I was back inside the car, I looked out the window, just observing the area. I saw the man who had been seemingly staring at me inside the store. He walked out of the convenience store and to a car which was parked at one of the parking spaces in front. I remember noticing him look in our direction, and I looked away, although I don't think he saw me because the back windows to our car were sort of tinted. I looked back and saw him getting into the driver's seat of the car. The car then sat there for a while, and soon my dad was finally done and got back inside and we left. We had a few more hours still to go, and we began leaving the gas station parking lot. I was still looking around, and I noticed the man's car start to leave around the same time as us. In fact, as we were waiting to merge back onto the road, he got right behind us. Soon, we did get back on the road and onto the freeway, but the man followed us the entire time. I remember noticing him driving on the freeway right behind us, and I figured that it was just a coincidence. I thought maybe he was just going the same direction as us, and I stopped paying attention. But I looked back probably about 30 minutes later, and the guy was still there. He was still directly behind us too. I started then to get a little concerned. I remembered that a short time later, my brother said he had to use the bathroom. My dad was slightly annoyed and said that he should have gone at the last gas station. Still, he pulled off at the next exit. When we did, the guy behind us did the same. My parents and brother were unaware of this guy following. I'm not sure why, but I didn't say anything to them. My dad found a gas station not far off at all, and we pulled in. My dad parked right out front, and the guy in the car following us parked on the other side of the lot. Just my brother went in and used the bathroom, then he returned a minute or so later. When we left, the guy following us left too. He hadn't even gotten out of his car. There was no question in my mind now that he was following us. We kept driving on the road towards my grandparents, and I was getting more and more concerned. What if the guy followed us all the way there? Probably another 30 minutes or so went by, and the guy was still there. Then, unbelievably, I saw him turn off at a random exit. After that, I never saw him again. I didn't even tell my parents about it, because I was just happy that the guy was gone. I'm convinced, though, that he was following us. Maybe he thought that we lived around there and wanted to see where exactly. I'm not sure why else he would suddenly stop, but I'm just glad that he left us alone. A few years ago, I was taking a cross-country road trip for work. I was driving by myself, and each night would stop at a hotel and sleep for the night. Well, sometimes in certain locations, there are not very many options for hotels. So I remember that I drove late into the night one of the days. The hotel that I got was this little one that was actually a motel. It was in a quiet town that didn't have much of anything. The motel had 2 levels of rooms, and each one would open up to the little sidewalk in front of the parking lot. I didn't have high expectations from the start. It was a place to sleep, and I was very tired. So I parked my car, got out, and then got my room key from the guy in the office. Then I walked down the sidewalk to my room. It was at that point when I first saw this guy walking down that same sidewalk. It was a man wearing a black jacket, and he was walking really slowly. I entered my room and then went inside. Then I pretty much started getting ready to go to bed. Maybe 10 minutes later, as I was getting into bed, I noticed out the front window the guy that I saw when entering. He was just kind of standing around. It was a little weird to me. The guy was not facing my window, but the other direction. I watched, and finally he walked a little bit to the right and out of view of my window. Then I went over and closed the shades. But just moments after that, the guy tried opening my room door. It was locked, so he couldn't get in. I didn't know what this guy was doing. I went back to the window and looked outside. I couldn't see the man anymore, and he was now gone. So then I went back to the bed and decided to try to go to sleep. But just moments later, there was a knocking on my door. I figured it was the same guy, and I ignored it entirely. The guy didn't knock again in that moment, and I was so tired that I soon fell asleep. But I wasn't asleep for very long. I remember waking up and hearing somebody banging loudly on the front door. I knew that it was probably the same guy again. Then he started yelling as well. He was cursing and demanding that I open the door for him. I had no idea why this guy was bothering me. I called the front desk to the motel, but I got no response. Then I called the police. I shouted to the man that I was calling the police as well. He continued to yell at me from outside though. The guy kept trying to open the door every now and then and continued to bang on it almost the entire time. This went on for the next 10 minutes until the police got there. Then the man was arguing with the police until they escorted him off the property. I was finally able to go back to sleep. Early the next morning, I left and was happy to get out of there and back on the road. For the rest of my trip, I made sure to get hotels that were a little bit nicer than that one. A few years ago, I was on a cross-country road trip because I was moving from one side of the country to the other. It was just me all by myself, and I enjoyed being able to live out of my car for a while. The only problem was that I had an old car that was on its last legs. I was planning to purchase a new car and get rid of the old one, but I decided to wait until after I moved because of all the hassle. The car would occasionally die, but for the first part of the trip, it did great. On the third day, it was really hot, and after driving almost non-stop for about 10 hours, night came and I was driving on the highways. Then I felt my car starting to die. It was about 9 p.m. and the road I was on was very quiet. It was not a major freeway because I was taking what the map told me was a shortcut. Instead, it was a little highway surrounded by mainly woods. I did not want to be stranded here. My car slowed down and came to a stop on the side of the road. I shut it off and waited a few minutes before trying to start it again. When I did, nothing happened at all. Then I took out my phone to call for help. But unfortunately, I saw that I had no service. I wasn't sure what to do. I decided to walk out of my car and see if my service would work a little ways up the road. I walked about 20 feet up the road looking at my phone to see if I would receive any bars. Just then, I heard a noise come from the woods. I thought it was probably a deer, but when I looked, I didn't see a deer. Instead, I saw legs of a man. I couldn't see the rest of him from the trees. I didn't know why a man would be in the woods at this time. It made me uncomfortable, so I walked back to my car. I got in, shut the door, and locked it. I looked into the woods from my car, but I didn't see anything. I went back to my phone and decided to restart it to see if maybe that would get me some service. It was a long shot, but I needed to try what I could. As my phone was restarting, I heard a noise to the right of my car. I looked, and my heart stopped when I saw a man standing at my passenger's window looking in. He looked dirty and was not wearing a shirt. He started trying to open the door. When it didn't open, he started banging on the window. I sat there for a few seconds, frozen with fear. Finally, I began to yell at him to go away, but it didn't seem to work. I tried my phone to call the police, but it still didn't have any service. Then the man suddenly stopped banging and ran back towards the woods. I saw him grab a large stick and then start to walk back to my car. I was about to get out and run away. I didn't have a plan after that, but I didn't feel safe in my car with that guy banging on it. As soon as I started to open my door, I saw bright headlights of a truck pulling behind me. The truck came to a stop behind my car. I got out and walked to it. It was a large-looking man who was wearing a camo jacket and started to ask if I needed a tow, but in the middle of his sentence, he saw the man with the stick arrive at my car. I told him the man seemed to be insane and was trying to get into my car. The man in the truck then reached under his seat and grabbed a gun and got out and yelled at the man. When the shirtless guy saw the gun, he dropped his stick and put his hands in the air. The man from the truck gave me his phone and told me to call the police. Luckily, he had service on his phone, and we waited until the police showed up. It was a crazy night that I will never forget. The old man got taken away, and my car got towed. I stayed in a nearby town at a hotel that night, and after my car was fixed, I sold it as soon as I got to my new house. About a month ago, I had a wedding that I was invited to. I decided to make a road trip because it was about a 10-hour drive for me, and the flights I was looking at were pretty expensive. Plus, there were some places along the way that I kind of wanted to see. I left early on the first morning of the trip and drove for much of the day, but I did stop at a few places and found myself driving on the road late at night. I was getting really tired, so I decided to look for a hotel. I pulled off the freeway and drove down the road looking for a gas station where I could fill up my tank and then look up a nearby hotel on my phone. I drove down a quieter road for maybe 2 or 3 miles. It was a lot longer than I thought it would take to reach a gas station, and I was starting to think about turning around when suddenly I saw a sign for a gas station up ahead. I had to take another road to the left, and then I saw this small gas station off in the distance. I pulled in and filled my tank. It was a small gas station, and it seemed to be sort of out in the middle of nowhere. When I was done, I went on my phone to look up a hotel, but when I did, I didn't have any service. I looked to the gas station, but the building part of it was closed. I didn't see any other cars or businesses on these roads at all. I figured I better just get back to the freeway and drive down it some more until I would have a signal on my phone. I started my engine and began driving back. I left the gas station, went down the quiet road, and then took a right. But when I went right, it didn't look familiar. Maybe I had turned too soon, or maybe I had missed the turn. It was really dark out, and the directions I had on my phone were not working because of the no signal problem. I drove down the road and saw a sign with the name of the exit I was trying to get to on it. I felt better and turned to drive that way, but when I pulled onto the road, I then saw a detour sign and a truck with flashing lights up ahead. I guess they were doing some sort of road construction, and I was forced to turn right instead of going straight. This was frustrating to me because I didn't know how long it was going to delay me, but what could I do? At least I was going in the right direction now. I drove down the road and then saw another detour sign telling me to turn once again. When I got to this road, it seemed even darker and quieter than the ones that I had been on. By now, I was feeling very lost. I drove down the next road for a minute or so, but then it suddenly stopped. It had led me right to a dead end. This had to be a mistake. The road just ended abruptly, and right in front of me was a woods. I stopped my car and took out my phone again. Still no signal. I was feeling really creeped out by all of this. I started to turn my car around, but just then, I saw several people coming out of the woods. They were all headed for my car and appeared to possibly have guns in their hands. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I slammed my foot to the gas pedal as hard as I could and drove my way out of there. As I started to drive, I heard somebody try to open the door of my rear driver's side. I sped away as fast as my car could go. I didn't hear any shots or anything like that, and I looked in the mirror to see the guy who had tried to get in my car running after me. Luckily, I was able to drive away. I tried my best to retrace the roads that I had been on. When I made it back to the original detour sign, it was now gone. I kept driving and was eventually able to find the gas station that I had been to. I started driving down roads, hoping to find my way back. I was pretty scared as I drove around those roads at night, but I never saw any other cars. Eventually, I was able to finally make it back to the freeway again, and later on, I had service and got a hotel. I hope to never have an experience like that again. Last year, I was taking a road trip to visit family. I left after work and would have about a 7-hour drive. I figured that I would get there at about midnight or so. Most of the driving was on freeways, which are pretty easy. Well, things were going great until about 10 or 11 o'clock at night. I was still a couple of hours away and was driving through a really rural area. There was pretty much just wildland on both sides of the freeway. By then, there were only a couple of other cars or trucks on the roads. I had directions on my phone, and I was also listening to music on it through Spotify and Bluetooth. First, I heard the voice from my directions say that there was a road closure up ahead. I realized that I was going to be taking a detour. I was still a couple of miles away, though. I was slightly annoyed, but I hoped that it wouldn't take me too much out of the way. About a minute later, my music stopped playing. I looked and saw that I now had no service. I must have been driving through a dead zone, and I wasn't all that surprised. A couple of minutes later, I had arrived to the detour. I had to take an exit and then drive down what was a very quiet road, and it was much smaller as well. It seemed like I was in the middle of nowhere. When I got on the road, I was looking at the directions on my phone. It said that I would be on that road for 3 miles. But shortly after, the map itself stopped working completely. I wasn't getting any kind of a signal at all. I kept driving and tried to take the logical route that would lead me back to the freeway. After a couple of miles, I started looking for left turns. The first one that I saw, I took. I figured that this was the road that I was supposed to take. This road, much like the last one, was very quiet. I was going much slower now, and it was very dark. After maybe 5 minutes on that road, I thought that I saw something up ahead. When I got closer, I slowed down significantly. There were grass fields and woods on both sides of the narrow road, but in the middle of it, up ahead, was a giant branch. It looked like a tree branch that had just fallen off and was covering almost the entire road. The trees weren't really hanging over the road, so it seemed a little bit odd. My car came to a stop, and I figured it wouldn't be too hard to move the branch out of the way. It didn't look very heavy, just big. When my car stopped, I was right about to open the door when I saw something. For whatever reason, I looked over to the right. When I did, I saw a man emerging from the woods about 30 feet away. He was walking towards my car. I had a really bad feeling, like I needed to get out of there ASAP. I put my car in reverse and then made a U-turn. I sped out of there and got back to the previous road. I drove on that road for probably 20 minutes until I had some service. When I did, I called the non-emergency number of the police and let them know about the guy. All in all, I got delayed by probably an hour, but I did make it back safely. I will never forget seeing that guy come out of the woods. I'm convinced that he put that tree branch there on the road to get people to stop and get out. I just hope nobody else fell for his trick. About 5 years ago, I had a wedding that I was invited to that was about a 17-hour drive away. I wanted to save some money, so I decided to drive there instead of flying. At first, my goal was to drive there all in one day, but as I got down there about 14 hours in, I became so sleepy that I couldn't keep going. I knew it would be dangerous for me to try to push through, so I stopped at the next sign I saw for a rest stop. I had no idea where I really was, but it seemed like a very quiet area. When I pulled into the rest stop, I was the only one there. It was dimly lit and had one small building with a bathroom, a few vending machines, and some information flyers. When I stopped, I looked at my phone quickly for hotels, but there weren't really any in the immediate area. The closest one was a 20-minute drive away, and I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open to look at my phone, so I knew I wouldn't make it. I went inside the rest stop and used the bathroom, and then got back in my car and put the seats back. As soon as I did, I immediately fell asleep. I normally wouldn't like sleeping in my car, and I would think it was too uncomfortable, but that's just how tired I was at the time. I was fast asleep until I woke up to something in the middle of the night. I was half asleep, but I thought I heard something. Then I heard it again. It was the sound of somebody trying to open my driver's side door. I moved my chair from laying back to an upright position and looked out the window. I didn't see anything other than the empty parking lot. I had to admit, though, I was a little freaked out. I thought maybe I was imagining things. I sat there for a while longer, but didn't seem to see or hear anybody. So then I laid back down and tried to fall asleep again. But after a few minutes, I just had a creepy feeling and couldn't really sleep at all. I looked at my phone and saw that it was 5 o'clock in the morning. I decided I would go into the rest stop and get something to drink. Then I would just finish off the drive. I got out of my car and walked inside. They had a coffee vending machine in there, so I got some and then went back to my car. But as I stepped out of the rest stop and saw my car, I could barely see what appeared to be someone hiding underneath the bottom of it. It was dark, but I saw an arm move from behind my tire underneath my car. I went all the way back into the bathroom and locked myself in one of the stalls. There was no other cars in the parking lot, and nobody was inside the rest stop either, which made it all the more creepy. I hoped to wait there for a little while and maybe the person would leave. But the more I sat there and thought about it, the more scared I got. Then I heard the door to the rest stop open and somebody walk in. My heart sank. I picked up my feet off the floor in the bathroom in case whoever it was came inside. I heard them walk around for a bit before getting closer and finally entering the bathroom. As they did, I felt as scared as I ever have been in my life. I quietly grabbed the door to the bathroom stall from the inside. I held it tight as the person walked a little ways into the bathroom and passed my stall to the other ones. Then I heard them start to get on the floor. I figured they were going to look underneath all the stalls to see which one I was in. I decided I needed to make a run for it right then and there. I opened the door as fast as I could and ran out. As soon as I did, I heard them start to get up and chase after me. I made it out of the building and began running for my car. When I was running, I heard the sound of a man screaming in a way that sounded completely insane. I ran back to my car and swung the door open as fast as I could. Then I got inside and locked it. I started the engine and sped away as I saw the man running for me. He looked angry and possibly dangerous. I was able to get away, but that was probably the scariest moment of my life.
This story takes place about a year ago. I was traveling all by myself on a road trip to visit family. It was a really long drive, and it would most likely take 2 whole days to get there. During the first day, I booked a hotel for a little bit past the halfway point. I wanted to get a little bit more driving done in the first day if possible. Things started out really well, and I only stopped a couple of times for gas, food, and to use the bathroom. I would stop at places that were the quickest, usually rest stops and gas stations just off the highway. I had been up since early in the morning, and if I had enough caffeine, it would usually keep me going. In the afternoon and early evening, though, I hit a rough patch of traffic. I think there was some road construction, and that was just a popular time to be on the road as well. Things got backed up and significantly slowed down for a few hours. I found myself now a bit behind the schedule I was hoping to be on. The hotel was already booked though, so I had to make it. Finally, at probably like 7 p.m., things started to clear up and the roads were much quieter. I was still almost 5 hours away from the hotel though. I stopped for gas, but then went right back on the road to try to save some time. At about 10 p.m., I was still on the road driving. I had an hour and a half to go, and I had no idea where I was. By now, the roads were very quiet, and I was one of the only cars driving. The area that I was in seemed like it was almost in the middle of nowhere. I was getting really tired as well, and had to use the restroom. I decided that I should stop and try to get an energy drink or something. My car was good on fuel, so I wouldn't need to get gas. I started looking for anything off the side of the road that I could go to. There didn't really seem to be anything though. Finally, I saw a sign for a rest stop just up ahead. I pulled off the road and was happy to hopefully get some energy to finish off the drive. As I approached though, the rest stop was a little underwhelming. It was very small, just a little building. There were some parking spaces along the road that went past it, and then back onto the freeway. The place was very dimly lit as well, and nobody else was there besides me. I parked my car and then got out and stretched my legs. I'd been driving for quite a long time without a break. Then I walked inside the small building that the rest stop had. Surrounding it was a little grassy area with a picnic table and what looked like a woods behind it. I had been to a similar rest stop before earlier in the day. Once I was inside, I used the restroom and then left. There was nothing inside the building besides a men's and women's restroom and a small lobby area with just some brochures. There was no vending machine, which is what I was hoping for to get an energy drink or something. At some rest stops, they have the vending machines outside on the side of the building instead of inside of it. I decided to walk around and see if they had one. I went around one side, and it was amazing how much darker and quieter it was over there. I heard some crickets chirping in the distance. The ground went slightly downhill as I walked around the building, but there were no vending machines. I got completely behind the building and was walking around to the other side. That's when I got a kind of eerie feeling for some reason. I stopped and looked around at the woods in the night. Then I heard a noise. It sounded like something was moving just inside of the woods, which was about 50 feet away probably. I thought maybe some kind of animal was there, and I sort of saw a tree branch moving a little. I stopped to see what it was, because I was curious, but part of me was wanting to just turn and run back to my car and get out of there. Still, I stood there looking to see what it was. As my eyes adjusted more to the darkness, I started to notice something. There appeared to be a man crouched sort of behind one of the trees. The guy was looking at me. I couldn't really tell any details about him at all, but he appeared to have a beard. After looking at him for a few seconds, he suddenly stood up. There were no other cars at the rest stop, so I didn't know what he was doing there. After standing, the man took a few steps towards me. I had a really bad feeling, and then the guy suddenly started sprinting in my direction. I took off running for my car as fast as I could. I ran around the building and into the parking area. When I was running, I could hear the man gaining on me from behind. I made it to my car and threw myself inside before slamming and locking the door. As I was scrambling to start my engine and drive away, the man reached my car. He started pounding on the window, and I backed out and drove off after he had smacked my window several times. I got back onto the highway and was really happy to be away from him. I decided to call the police and let them know about what had happened. I didn't want somebody else to stop there and have to encounter him. As for me, I was able to stop a little ways down the road and get an energy drink. I was in the middle of nowhere, but I made it to my hotel just after midnight.
Something really creepy happened a few months ago when I was on a road trip. I found myself driving really late at night because I was trying to find a hotel. I had stopped at a gas station, but I had no service, so I started driving to hopefully get service in the next town. However, I must have really been in a dead zone because as I continued driving, I just didn't have any service. After driving for like 20 more minutes, I took the next exit to try to find a gas station again. I still didn't have service, and at that point, I was just going to buy a map or see if the worker at the gas station knew of any nearby hotels. So after taking the exit, I did not immediately see any gas stations or anything really. I kept driving and then took another road, hoping that it would be more promising, but it wasn't. This road appeared very quiet, and very shortly after turning onto it, I noticed something strange. There appeared to be two men just sort of standing in the middle of the road. This was confusing. They did not appear to be construction workers right off the bat because they weren't wearing reflective vests or anything, and they also did not appear to be police. As I got closer, I saw that they were just wearing regular clothes. However, they both looked right at me as I approached them. I thought they might move off to the side of the road or something. Nothing appeared wrong with the street, and this was not a road that had a sidewalk on it or anything. There was woods on both sides, and it didn't seem like anybody would be out walking around there. The men stood there in the middle of the street, blocking me from passing. I came to a complete stop, and I had a bad feeling about it. I decided that it would be best to just leave. But before I did, I saw that the men were walking towards me. I lowered my driver's window a little and asked what was going on, but they didn't answer me. They just continued approaching. One of them was going towards each side of my car. I then hit reverse and started slowly backing up. One of the men went faster towards me, and I saw the other guy going to the side of the road. At that point, I turned to try to turn my car around so that I could drive the opposite way. I was far enough from the men that I didn't think they would catch me in the small amount of time that I would be stopped. So I went slightly off the road, stopped, put my car into drive, and then I started going the opposite way. By now, one of the men had gotten within 30 feet of my car, and the other was a short distance behind that. But the second man was now holding something large. I hit the gas, not knowing what it was, and started to drive away from there. In my mirror, as I was driving off, I saw the man go down and slide the object. Whatever it was slid pretty fast, and it almost reached my car, but it went off the road right behind me. That's when I realized it was probably a spike strip, the stuff that police use to pop a suspect's tires in a chase. So these guys were trying to pop my tires, but I knew that these men were not police. I kept driving away, and I got onto the next road which led to the highway. Then I tried calling the police, but I still had no service. I got back to the highway and drove down for a little while. About 15 minutes later, I finally had service again. Then I called the police. I told them about it, and they said they would go over and look into it. The men were probably gone by then though, and I never heard anything more about it. I was able to get to a hotel that night, and then continue with my road trip. This is something that still freaks me out to this day when I think about it. I'm not sure if those guys were trying to rob me or what, but I'm just really glad that I got away from them.
Last summer, I took a road trip to visit a couple of friends. I went to high school with them both, and they went to college out in California and since moved there after graduating. So every summer, I try to go there at least once and visit, because we've always been good friends. Last year, I drove because there was a lot of places along the way that I wanted to go to. Many were parks or cool destinations to do some sightseeing. It would take a few days to do the entire drive, so I left early to be able to stop places that I wanted to. The first couple of days of the trip went really well, but on the third day I was hoping to arrive, and I found myself still driving at night. I still had a few hours left, and it was probably like 9 or 10 p.m. by now. The roads were quiet, which was nice, and I was looking forward to getting to my friend's place. I had plenty of fuel, but I needed to use the restroom and wanted to get something to drink as well. So I decided to stop at the next exit, whatever it was. Well, there was a rest stop just a few miles up the road. I pulled off the highway straight into the rest area. Now this one was very small. It was not one of those big rest stops that has a truck stop and a gas station attached to it. This was just one fairly small building with one row of parking out front. When I got there, I noticed that it was pretty dark and there appeared to be nobody else there at all. So I parked my car, got out, and then started walking to the building. I took my time and stopped to stretch a little, because I had been driving for such a long time. I remember though, as I was walking into the building, I did notice hearing a car entering the rest stop from the highway. I looked around inside of the rest stop building, which had a small area with brochures and vending machines. Then there was a hallway with a janitor's closet, and a men's restroom at one side and a women's restroom on the other. I looked at one of the vending machines for a moment. Then I turned around and noticed that the car that had entered the rest stop was parking right next to mine. I found this to be a little bit odd with all the other open spaces. I went into the restroom and was back out within probably a minute or so. I noticed that the car was still parked next to mine and had the lights on, so it appeared as though the driver was still inside. This sort of made me wonder what the driver was doing, but overall it didn't seem like a huge deal. Then I turned my attention back to the vending machine and decided what to get. Eventually I picked and then got a drink. I looked back to my car and the one next to mine was still running. I started walking to head out, but just a few feet from the door, I saw the engine turn off to the car next to mine. Then the driver's door opened and a man got out. I stopped where I was near the door. The man then started walking towards my car instead of going into the rest stop. Now this was really weird. The man walked around my car and went behind it where I couldn't see him. He almost seemed to crouch down as well. I kept watching and I didn't see him anymore. It appeared as though the guy was hiding behind my car for some reason, or possibly he was trying to break in or something. I didn't want to go out and confront him, so I stayed where I was. I watched for several minutes, expecting to see the man again at any moment, but I didn't. So apparently, he was still hiding behind my car. Finally, I decided to go out and see what he was doing. I walked out of the building and got within about 20 feet of the two cars. I still couldn't see the guy at all, but I was sure that he was there. I called out to him, asking what was going on, but I got no response. Now, I didn't want to go to my car. I was afraid that it might be some kind of a trap or something. So I walked back to the rest stop and went inside. Once I was in there, I continued to watch, but I didn't see anything. For a few minutes, I wasn't really sure what to do. I started just walking around the small rest stop, and I remember I made my way down the hallway. This was at the back end, in between the two bathrooms. I was sort of near the janitor's closet, and as I was over there, I heard the main door to the rest stop open. That had to be the guy that was hiding behind my car. I would have heard if another car had driven in. There was luckily a rear exit to the rest stop. I quickly walked over to it and left the building. I walked as fast as I could back around the building towards my car. Then I cut through the grass and headed to the sidewalk. As I was doing this, I heard the front door to the rest stop building open up. I looked over and saw the guy. He was leaving and walking very quickly in my direction. I just started sprinting towards my car. I was able to make it there and then left as fast as possible. The man made it back to his car and got inside of it, but by then, I was already driving off. As soon as I made it back onto the highway, I took the first exit. I could see the guy getting onto the highway from the rest stop a long distance back, and after taking my exit, I was able to lose the guy quickly by going down some other streets. After I got back to the highway again, I called the police and reported what happened. I think that man's behavior was really suspicious. I'm not sure what he wanted. I'm really glad that I got away from him though.
I had to go on a pretty long road trip for work a couple of years ago. We had to travel, but I decided to drive instead of fly because I thought it would be more fun. I had a couple of days off before work started in that location, and when we were done, I had a whole week off. During the time that I was there, we would be working for about a week and a half straight. So anyways, I drove straight there on the way, and when we were done, I took my time driving back. I stopped at a few parks that I wanted to go to, and also stopped at some major cities and locations as well. On my road trip back, I would be spending 2 days just outside of a city where there were a lot of cool parks. I had a hotel, and I was busy exploring for most of the days. During the second day, I went to a really busy park with a bunch of hiking trails and some great views. At one of the hiking spots that was somewhat busy, I ran into a guy who was from the same state as me. We had a brief conversation, and he was really friendly. He said that his name was Mark, and we were from the same general area. It was funny to meet someone else from the same area so far away. Our conversation went on for a while, and Mark ended up asking me what hotel I was staying at. I told him, not realizing how weird it was at the time. But after that, the whole conversation sort of went from normal and friendly to a little weird. I ended up just saying that I really had to go and kind of walked away. He had started out seeming so normal to me and then seemed somewhat creepy at the end. We went our separate ways, but I didn't see him for a while. I did happen to notice him when I was leaving about an hour later though, but there were still quite a few other people in that area, so I didn't think too much of it. That was probably sometime in the afternoon. I went somewhere else and then went to the local city before going back to my hotel for the night. I got back at maybe 9 p.m. or so. I stayed in my hotel room watching the TV until I got tired. And sometime later, at maybe 10:30 at night, there was a knock on my hotel room door. I got up and walked over to see who was there. It was Mark. He was standing right outside of the door. This surprised me, but I remembered that I had told him where I was staying. I felt really stupid, but just telling him did not mean that I had invited him over. And how would he know which room was mine? I decided not to answer the door. I watched out of the peephole as he continued to stand there. He knocked on the door again and waited. I was sort of nervous because I didn't know what he wanted or anything about him really. He had been seeming pretty weird towards the end of our conversation earlier. Mark stood there for maybe 2 or 3 minutes before turning and walking away. I was glad to see him go, but I had a feeling that he might return. The hotel that I was staying in was pretty average,
It wasn't fancy or anything, but it also wasn't that bad. My room was on the first floor and on the back side of the hotel. Maybe 2 minutes after Mark left, I had returned to the bed that I was sitting on. That's when I heard a knocking on my window now. I looked and saw Mark standing there, right at the window and looking at me. He waved me over. I got up and walked over to the window, but to close the blinds. When I did, Mark started banging louder on the window. It didn't last very long though before he stopped. I thought maybe after that he had left, but he didn't. There was another knocking on the front door of my hotel room again just a few minutes later. I got up to check, and sure enough, it was Mark again. I went back over to my bed, and this time I called the police. I wasn't even going to bother calling the hotel and complaining to them. They didn't have a security guard or anything, so there probably wasn't much that they could do. I explained the situation to the 911 operator and was told that somebody would be there shortly. Mark had stopped knocking by then and was now gone. I wasn't sure where he went, but I expected him to come back either to the window or the door. The police arrived several minutes later, and I spoke with them as they looked around for Mark. Unfortunately, he had taken off and left. The police found that he had broken into my car. My rear passenger's window was smashed. Items inside were messed up, but surprisingly, nothing was stolen. I'm not sure if he did that because he was mad at me, or if he was trying to steal something. Either way, I never saw him again, and I'm hoping that I never do.
I took a road trip a few months ago. I was by myself, and this story takes place when I was driving back home. It had been a long day of driving, and it was late at night. I was going to a hotel, and I would be getting back home the next day. My plan had been to arrive at the hotel at about 10 o'clock at night, but it had been storming for most of the day, and that slowed me down quite a bit. By the time it was 11 p.m., I was still an hour and a half away from the hotel. I don't really know what city I was in. I was just driving down the freeway. By now, the roads were very quiet. I had plenty of gas, but I really had to go to the bathroom. I started keeping my eyes peeled for an exit coming up, and a few minutes later, I saw one. There was a sign that said rest area. I took the exit, and when I got to it, I saw that there was a parking lot with a smaller building, some grass, and a few picnic tables. I parked in front of the building and noticed that there was only one other car there. It was a ways down from mine. I looked around the place, and it was really sketchy. The building was small and looked kind of outdated. The parking lot was not very well lit at all. I could tell that there was somebody sitting in the driver's seat of the only other car there, and I don't know what they were doing. It almost seemed as though they were looking at me. I was strongly considering not using the bathroom here and driving to another place, but after debating it for a few moments, I decided to just go inside. My mind was probably making more of this just because of how things looked. I opened my door and got out. I walked up the sidewalk to the building. As I opened the door, I heard the guy get out of the car that was in the parking lot. I cringed when I heard this. I just had a bad feeling about it, but it was too late for me to go back to my car now. I walked inside into the bathrooms, which were just to the left. I used the restroom, and as I was washing my hands at the sink, I heard footsteps approaching right outside the bathroom door. I expected the guy to enter, but the footsteps seemed to stop right outside. It seemed as though the man was right on the other side of the door. I didn't leave. Instead, I walked back over and went inside one of the stalls. There were about 4 or 5 stalls, and I went into the second one. I closed and locked the stall door. About 30 seconds later, the man entered the bathroom. When the guy got inside, he walked right over to my stall. He then tried opening it. I was really creeped out. There were 4 other open stalls, and this guy was trying to get into mine. What a weirdo. After trying to open the stall, he didn't say anything. He just stood there, right outside of the door. I could kind of see him through the slim crack. I wanted to just get out of there. I grabbed some toilet paper, a big wad of it. When I did, I compressed it into a ball. Then, I tossed it over the top of the bathroom stall into one of the other ones to the right. Right as I did so, I burst open the door, which pushed the man back. I was able to get past him, but didn't get a whole lot of distance away from him before he started chasing after me. Luckily, I had created just enough of a distraction to get past. When I made it out of the building, he was maybe 15 feet behind me. I ran to my car and got inside. I shut the door moments before he arrived and tried to open it. I locked my door, then started my engine and drove off. When I got back to the road, the guy didn't bother to drive after me, which I was glad to see. Of course, I had to call the police and let them know what had happened. I didn't want somebody else to pull into the rest stop and be targeted by that guy like I was. Hopefully, they found him before he left, but I never heard if they did or not.
Two summers ago, I was on a cross-country road trip with my wife. We were going to visit relatives for a big family gathering. We chose to drive because we could make several stops along the way of cities that we liked, plus we had some extra time. The first day, we drove a good 8 or 9 hours and then stopped in for the evening. On the second day, we wanted to make it a little bit farther, so we drove a little later into the night. We got off the freeway at about 11 p.m. and went onto a highway. The highway had woods on both sides of it and was pretty quiet at this time. We only saw a couple of other cars on the road. About 10 minutes into being on that road, we saw what appeared to be a man standing in the middle of the road, waving his arms. I slammed on my brakes to slow down. When we got closer, we could see that it was an older-looking man who appeared to be in his 70s. He looked like he was in trouble, and we stopped the car. The old man came up to my driver's window, and I rolled it down just a crack. He seemed genuinely concerned. He said that his car ran out of gas a ways back off a side road, and he was walking to try to get back to his house. He asked if we could drive him to his house, and said it was just a couple miles away. My instant reaction, of course, was to say no, and I really wished that I did. But the old man seemed so harmless, so I figured why not help the guy out. I told him to get in the back and I would give him a ride. He got into the back seat of my car and said thank you to us several times. Then he told us his house was just up the road and he had some gas he could take to his car in his other truck. He directed us to his house. We drove up the road about a mile, then took an exit to a very quiet road surrounded by dense woods on both sides. We continued down this road for a minute or so when the man told us to turn at what appeared to be a driveway. I pulled into it and asked the man if this was his driveway. He said yes, but then asked if we could drive farther up. It was a skinny driveway that winded around, and I could not see very far in front because of all the trees. I kept driving down the skinny drive. I started to get a bad feeling. Then the skinny road turned into a clearing. The man said this was fine and we could drop him off here. Then he got out of my car. But as soon as he got out, I saw movement coming from the woods behind my car. Then I turned and saw more movement in the front. I didn't hesitate at all, and I stomped on the gas and put my car in reverse, not even knowing what it was. My wife then started to scream. I looked and saw multiple men running at my car from 2 different directions. I backed out the skinny driveway as fast as I could. A man hit the side of my car with something, I don't even know what. I got out of the driveway and back onto the road and sped off to the highway. My wife was shaking, and I have to admit that I was too. I don't know what kind of trap that old man was trying to lure us into, but I know I'm never stopping to pick anyone up again.
Last summer, I went on a cross-country road trip with my best friend Emma. Between the two of us, we could drive for very long periods of time. We were switching off when we got tired, and sometimes one of us would drive while the other slept. I remember that on one of the first nights of the trip, we found ourselves driving on a quiet highway late at night. I don't know exactly what time it was, but we were about the only car on the road. We had stopped for gas maybe 30 minutes earlier and got some coffee as well. We were in the right lane, and I was driving with Emma in the front passenger seat. We were casually talking to each other, and a car appeared behind us in the rearview mirror. I was driving probably 5 miles per hour over the speed limit and was on cruise control. The car behind us approached, going maybe 5 miles per hour faster than us.
When it got closer, it changed to the left lane and then started passing us. The car was a black SUV, and when it got in front of us, it pulled into the right lane. After it did, it slowed down significantly. It's like whoever was driving took their foot off the gas pedal entirely. It was kind of rude, to be honest, and I switched lanes to the left to go around them. When I did, though, they immediately switched to the left lane, as if to throw a block at me. The SUV had no license plates on it at all, and I had a sort of bad feeling. We were going slower and slower, and wondering what this person's problem was. I quickly switched lanes again, and this time, I was able to pass them. As I did, I looked over and saw a man driving. He looked over at us as we passed. I was speeding up significantly because we had slowed down to probably 40 miles per hour or something. The roads we were on had a speed limit of 70. The guy in the SUV then started speeding up extremely fast as well. I got back up to about 70, and the guy was now right behind us. We remained this way for probably 10 minutes. He was like one car length behind us, and it became obvious that he was going to follow us wherever we went. I didn't know what his problem was with us. Emma suggested that we take the next exit and see if the man would take the exit too. And when the next one came up, I did just that. The guy followed us off the highway to the exit ramp. We didn't know where we were or what direction this was leading us in either. After taking the exit, I went right because it seemed like there were a couple of businesses over there and not much to the left. The guy was still behind us in the black SUV. I saw a gas station and there were 2 other cars there at the pumps. This made me feel a little bit safer and I pulled in. We didn't even need gas though, but I parked next to one of the pumps anyways because it was well lit. The guy in the black SUV parked at a gas pump that was a little ways away from us. Emma and I got out of our car and walked inside the building. It was Emma's idea to go inside, and I'm not really sure exactly why, but we did. When we got inside, there was another person in the gas station, as well as an employee. The guy from the SUV did not follow us in. It felt safer being inside and away from him, but I also knew that we would have to return to our vehicle and keep driving eventually. I was hoping that the guy would drive away and leave. I walked over to the front of the store to look out the window. When I did, I saw the man moving from behind his car to behind ours. He was sort of crouched down, like he was hiding from us as well. I went over to Emma, who was at another spot inside the gas station. I told her about the guy, and we called the police. We told them what was going on, and clearly the man was up to something bad. He sat there, hiding behind our car for quite a while. From where he was at, we couldn't see him at all though. I just knew that he hadn't left because I would have seen him leave. If we had gone back to our vehicle without knowing, who knows what would have happened. We spoke with the employee of the gas station and told him what was going on, and about 10 minutes later, a police car entered the gas station parking lot. Emma and I were watching from the window the whole time. We saw the guy run out from behind our car, back to his SUV and get in. The police flashed their lights, and the man attempted to drive away. Both him and the police car left the parking lot. There seemed to be a police chase after that, but it didn't last too long. The guy ended up being caught a little ways down the street. After that, Emma and I were able to continue with our road trip. It still creeps me out to think about that man though. Possibly he saw us at the previous gas station that we had been to and decided to follow us for some reason. That's my best guess. What his intentions were, I have no idea.
Last summer, I was driving on a road trip from one side of the country to the other. I was relying on the maps that were built into my phone to take me to my destinations. Usually they worked out great, but on the 3rd day of my trip, very late at night, I was trying to get to my next hotel. I was really out there in the middle of nowhere, and at this point, had mainly just been seeing woods and fields of grass. I also had been having some trouble with the maps on my phone. The signal kept going in and out, and sometimes the destinations would disappear and reappear. At one point, they stopped working completely. Anyways, I had been off the freeway and was driving on a quieter road. I don't know why looking back, but I was still trusting my maps. They told me to turn onto a dirt road that looked like it was going right smack into the middle of the woods. That was the first time I seriously started questioning my maps. That was the first time I seriously started questioning things. I knew sometimes they made mistakes and had errors, but this seemed a little bit crazy. There had to be a better road to drive on than this to get to my destination. As I drove down this road, I started to lose my signal. I tried typing the destination out again to see other routes, but nothing would happen, so I kept driving. There were absolutely no other cars on this road at all, and it was very dark other than the lights from my headlights. I kept going through and figured I would be off the road before long. I would say about 10 minutes into that, I saw the trees moving on the right side of the road as if an animal was in there. I thought maybe a deer was going to run across the road, so I started to slow down. Then I saw a creature jump out from the woods and run alongside of it for a short time before darting back into it. But this creature was like nothing I had ever seen before. It had to be about 20 feet tall and almost as skinny as a stick. It had long, skinny limbs, almost like hair. I literally jumped back in my seat as I saw it and swerved to the other side of the road. When the creature darted back into the woods, it pressed back many tree branches and caused it to look like there had been a strong wind blowing on them. I immediately sped up my car. I was terrified, and I couldn't believe what I had just seen. I wanted to get out of there as quickly as I could. But as I drove my car, it started to sputter as if it was going to die. I had almost a full tank of gas, so I knew that wasn't the problem. The lights in the car started to get dim as well. And this was strange because I had never had problems with it before. It was fairly new. I saw the ending of the road coming up and a paved road nearby. My car slowed down more and more as I got to it, but finally I was off the dirt road and onto a real one. As soon as my car got back onto the normal road again, it started running just fine. I drove for a bit and the car was completely normal again. Then the signal came back on my phone. I took a couple of more turns and made it back to a freeway. I was able to drive the rest of the trip with no problems. But looking back on that night, I know what I saw, but I have no idea how to explain it. This happened to me last summer. It was during a road trip that I was taking from my home in Ohio to New York. It started out well. I was making good time, the weather was great, and I was enjoying the views as I made my way down the freeways. I had decided that I would try my best to do the whole drive in one day because it was about an 8-hour drive for me. I already had a hotel booked, and I was on pace to get there at about 10 p.m. until I hit some traffic about 5 hours into the drive. It eventually cleared up, and at about 9 p.m., I was only 2 hours away from my hotel. But that's when things started to get strange. The roads were much quieter now with it being dark out. I was driving in the right lane with my car on cruise control. I was kind of zoned out, just driving and listening to the radio, when I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye. There was a car next to me, and I realized that it had been next to me for seemingly a while now. I looked over at it, and could see that the car seemed to be going the exact same speed as me, and that I was perfectly aligned with the driver's window so I could see inside the car. When I looked over, I saw that the driver of the car was looking right at me. This car was a black Jeep SUV, and it looked a little bit old. His front passenger side window was rolled down, allowing me to see him pretty clearly. The driver looked to be a man wearing a baseball cap and big sunglasses. He was just staring at me. Then he started to point. I watched him point at me, and I was really confused. I gave a little smile, thinking it was a joke, and then focused my eyes back onto the road. I could tell out of my side vision, though, that the man was still pointing at me. Not only that, but he seemed to be motioning now. I looked over again. Now the man was pointing at me and then moving his hand around a little bit. I thought maybe he saw something wrong with my car, like maybe a flat tire. I looked at the guy with a confused face. The guy was still pointing at me, and it appeared as though he was motioning for me to pull over now. It seemed weird to me, and I kind of had to get gas anyways. I was at a quarter tank, so I decided at the next exit I would pull off. As I drove down the road, the man remained next to me. I kept seeing him look over or make more hand gestures to me. I took the car off of cruise control because this guy was starting to make me really uncomfortable. But when I slowed down or sped up, he would quickly adjust his speed to match mine. At last, after probably 5 minutes, I saw an exit and I took it. I put my turn signal on a little bit late, just in case the guy was going to try to follow me. When I took the exit though, he didn't. I watched him just keep driving down the freeway. I was relieved and figured maybe he was trying to point something out that was wrong with my car. Either way, it was a rather strange way of doing it. I entered a little town with a gas station a short ways down the road and pulled into it. It was nice and a pretty big gas station. I was able to fill up my tank and then got out of my car to examine it. When I did, everything seemed fine. I looked all around it. My tires weren't low, my license plates were on all correctly, taillights and headlights were also working. I didn't know what the guy was gesturing about. I just shrugged it off and decided to finish up my drive. I only had about an hour and a half left until my hotel, and I was starting to get tired. I left the gas station and then took the ramp to go back onto the freeway that I had been driving on. As I drove down the ramp and was beginning to merge back onto the freeway though, I saw a car pull over on the side of the road up ahead. When I got closer, I recognized it to be a black Jeep. It was just sitting there. Could it be the same guy? As I approached it, I saw it start to move again, and after I passed it, I saw that it was now merging back onto the freeway. My heart dropped. Were they waiting for me? I kept driving and watched them speed up and then start to drive next to me again. Once again, the guy rolled down his window and started looking at me. This time, I rolled down my window as well. He was motioning for me to pull over, and I yelled out my window to him. I asked him what he wanted, but I didn't get a vocal response, just more pointing. The guy's face remained expressionless the entire time I saw him. I don't know why, but I decided to pull over. I thought maybe something was wrong with my car, and I just hadn't seen it when I looked at it. I was definitely no car expert by any means. I slowed down, and so did the man. Eventually, I came to a stop on the side of the road. I saw that the Jeep slowed down and pulled over to a stop maybe 50 feet in front of me. We both sat there stopped for a few seconds. Then all of a sudden, I saw the two rear doors of the Jeep open up. Two large men came out and started approaching my vehicle quickly. The men were both wearing jackets and had on baseball caps and sunglasses as well. As they got closer, their pace changed from a fast walk to a jog. I put my car back into drive at that point, and when they were maybe just 15 feet away, I pulled back onto the freeway and drove away. Luckily, no other cars were going down the freeway at that moment. I sped away, and as the men realized they wouldn't reach my car, they turned and ran back to the Jeep, which still had the driver inside of it. I floored it, and was able to put some ground between myself and the Jeep before the guys got back inside of it. I could see it start to drive again, and I kept driving. I went a ways down the road, and the Jeep was still pretty far behind me. I noticed an exit and immediately took it and began driving down random roads. After that, I took a different route to get to my hotel without going back on that freeway. I didn't see the Jeep again, and it took me almost an hour longer to get to my hotel, but it was well worth it to not run into those people again.
I was taking a long road trip last year for work. I do a lot of traveling for my job, but I will spare you the details of work and get to my story. I left the city I was staying in at about 4 p.m., and I knew it would be a late night of driving, and I probably wouldn't arrive to my hotel until around 2 in the morning. I drove for hours and hours. The roads were pretty crowded when I started, and by the end of my drive, they were very quiet. It got to be around 1 in the morning, and I was about an hour and a half from my destination. The roads were very clear, so that was nice, and I was feeling pretty good. I was kind of in the middle of nowhere at this point, and as I drove along, I noticed a car come into my rearview mirror. It seemed to be going pretty fast. I was in the right lane already, so I expected it to blow past me. It reached my car and then slowed down so it was going around the same speed as me. I looked over to see. It was an old beat-up car that appeared to be about 20 years old and had some duct tape over one of the windows. But when I looked at the driver, I saw that he was wearing a skeleton mask. He looked at me for a good second, and then he turned and sped forward. I shook my head and kept driving. He went past me and then turned into my lane in front of me and drove about 5 car lengths ahead of my car, but maintained that same speed. When I looked in my mirror again, I saw more cars approaching. They too were going pretty fast. They reached my car and the first one began to pass me. I glanced over to see that this man was also wearing a skeleton mask. He passed me and drove side by side with the car ahead of me. The next car pulled forward, and then another. Every driver of these cars were wearing skeleton masks. I looked behind me and saw even more cars.
By now, I was completely surrounded by these skeleton masked drivers. I started to get really creeped out, and I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't know what was going on and if these people were trying to run me off the road or something. I kept driving, and before long, the cars seemed to get closer to me. I knew I would have to do something, and I was hoping that an exit would come up. About a mile later, I was happy to see an exit finally come. I maintained my speed with the cars closing in on me, and at the last second, I swerved onto the exit ramp from the freeway. The two cars in front of me and the one next to me were unable to make the exit, so it was just me and a bunch of cars following me now. I took a right and frantically looked around of where I should drive. There was about 5 cars trailing me. I drove down the road, and one of the cars behind me started to speed up to pass. We passed a restaurant and another business, but then I saw a gas station, and to my surprise, I happened to notice a police car parked at it. I quickly swerved over and entered the station and drove my car right next to the police and parked. A few of the cars pulled in and then drove through the gas station and left. I waited for the officer to return to his car from the convenience store, and when he did, I told him about my situation. He said he would alert the other police in the area and even offered to drive a few miles behind me on the freeway to make sure I wouldn't get followed again. That is exactly what we did, and I was able to make it safely to my hotel about an hour later.
A couple of years ago, I went on a road trip to go hiking in several different parks. I've been really into hiking for a long time now, and I've been to many cool locations. So on this road trip, I remember the second night I was driving on the highway. It was kind of late, and I was basically in the middle of nowhere. I was about the only car on the road, it seemed. But soon, I noticed a car coming up behind me. I was in the right lane, and the car moved into the left lane to pass me. But when the car got about even with the speed that I was going, instead of passing, it went the same as me. I saw something out of the corner of my eye and then looked over. The driver of this car was a guy that was bald and wearing sunglasses. He had rolled his passenger side front window down, and he was waving over at me. When I looked at him, he started making some hand motion. I rolled down my window, and I could tell that he was saying something as well. It kind of seemed to me like he was signaling that something was wrong with my car. He was yelling, but I couldn't hear a word that he was saying. We were going too fast. And I knew that this guy didn't know me, because I was several states away from where I lived, and I didn't recognize this guy. He continued to yell at me and make motions with his hands. I figured that something must be wrong with my car. Maybe I had a flat tire, although everything seemed fine to me. I looked, and my check engine light was not on. And I'm no car expert, but I didn't feel anything strange. Still, I was convinced that this man saw something that I didn't. I decided to take the next exit, which was coming up on the right. So I slowed down, and the man remained next to me. Then I took the exit, and the man followed in his car. I pulled into a gas station, which was about the only thing in that area. When I did, I saw that nobody else was there. I parked my car, and the guy parked next to me. Then we both got out of our vehicles. The man approached me and said that there was something wrong with my car. He then told me that he saw it emitting black smoke. I asked him what that meant, and he said that it meant there was something seriously wrong with the engine. Then he told me to get in his car, and he would give me a ride to the nearest mechanic and get it fixed. When he said that, I got a bad feeling, because I didn't really want to go anywhere with this guy. I told him to wait, and tried to get him to explain more of the problem to me. And I also realized I hadn't noticed any kind of black smoke. I know it was dark out, but I just think that I would have noticed if my car was smoking. It seemed like it was running fine. The man asked me to get into his car again. Now I was getting a really bad feeling, and the guy was starting to seem really sketchy. I mean, why would he drive me to a mechanic? They would have to be closed by now because it was nighttime. Before he said anything else, I just got right back into my car and shut the door and locked it. The man walked over as I started the engine. He was telling me to stop and started yelling that my engine would break. I didn't believe him though. My car started up just fine. The man tried opening my driver's door, but I then drove away from him. He got back into his car as I was driving away. Luckily though, He did not follow me. I saw him stay in the gas station as I left, and then I merged back onto the highway. Now, after my road trip, I did take my car to a mechanic. I was told that nothing was wrong with it at all. I know that the man was probably just trying to get me into his car. That really gives me the creeps.
Last year, I went on a road trip with my girlfriend. We were taking a vacation, but we chose to drive instead of flying. We did that because we could stop more places and explore, and also because it was cheaper. This was the second road trip that we had taken together, and the first one was a lot of fun, so we were looking forward to it. When the road trip started, the first day of driving went by really well. We stopped at a few cool places and explored around some towns. Then we made it to our hotel for the night. The next day, we got up bright and early in the morning and hit the road. We were hoping to make it all the way to our destination by that night. It was a long day of driving, but overall it was fun. However, we ended up driving sort of late into the night. By about 10 p.m., we still had another hour and a half left. I was driving and I decided to stop at the next gas station because we were running a little low. Plus, I wanted to get a coffee and some snacks, and my girlfriend wanted coffee as well. So at the next exit, I pulled off of the highway that we were on. There was a pretty large truck stop, it appeared, with a gas station and store attached. When I arrived there, I first put more fuel into the car, and then I went and parked next to the store. There were a decent number of other cars and trucks around, and this was clearly a pretty popular place for people to stop. So my girlfriend and I got out of the car and started walking in. I do remember that as we were walking in, a few other people were as well, including a family with a few children a little bit ahead of us. We got inside of the store and first used the restrooms. Then my girlfriend said that she would get the coffee if I wanted to look for some snacks. The store was very large for a truck stop. It had quite a few aisles, and there was a coffee shop type of place attached to it, which is where my girlfriend went. So I started to walk through the snack aisles and think about what I wanted to get. It was a few minutes into that I noticed a man and a child start to walk into the aisle that I was in. The man was a bit larger of a guy who appeared to be in his 40s or so, and the child looked to be about 5 or 6. The man was holding onto the kid's hand, and it seemed as though after they saw me in the aisle, they turned around and walked out. But when I looked at the kid, I remembered seeing him walking into the store with the family ahead of us. I had seen the kid's parents, and this guy was not one of them. I got a bad feeling, like maybe this guy was trying to kidnap the kid or something. I thought about it for a moment, and I was 90% sure that this kid didn't belong to him, and the way that the man was holding on to the child's hand seemed almost like he was dragging him along. I decided to go and see where the guy was going, so I walked over to the end of the aisle. I didn't immediately see the man, so I scanned around the store. Then I noticed him walking along the backside of the store near the cold drinks. He was still with the child. After making it to the corner of the store, he walked along the next side of it going towards the exit doors. When I saw this, I walked forward and I reached the doors before the man would. Soon, the man and the child reached me. I remember that the man said, "Excuse me," and started to walk around me, but I said, "Wait a minute." The man stopped and looked at me. His face appeared nervous. I flat out asked him if that was his kid, and I said that I saw the child enter with other parents. The man said yes, it was his son. I looked to the boy, who seemed shy and a little bit confused. I asked if that was his dad, and he shook his head saying no. The man then started to open the door anyways and tried to leave with the kid. By now, we had been standing there for almost a minute. I spoke louder, saying that I just wanted the other people to come over and confirm if it was their kid or not. Before I got done speaking though, the man suddenly let go of the child and just ran out the door. I watched him walk at an extremely fast pace to this old-looking van and get inside of it. I tried looking for the license plate number, but I couldn't see good enough. Then I walked with the child around the store until we finally found his parents. When I found them, I told them what happened. They were obviously upset, but also grateful. The parents had 3 other kids, and one of the older children apparently was supposed to be watching the younger one. I'm not sure where the man had come from, but I'm really glad that he didn't leave with the child. The police got called, and there was a big investigation. My girlfriend and I then went back onto the road.
In the summer of 2018, I was taking a road trip with two of my friends to Cleveland. We were planning to arrive in Cleveland at about 11 p.m. Everything was going smoothly, and at around 10 p.m., we were about an hour away. My friend Sean said he really needed to use the bathroom, and my friend John, who was driving, really didn't want to stop. After arguing back and forth for several minutes, John finally pulled off the freeway and into a rest stop. The rest stop was quiet, but there were about 2 or 3 cars spread out over the parking lot. Sean got out and went to the bathroom. Me and John stayed in the car to wait. After about a minute, we saw Sean running from the bathrooms and toward us. He got in the back of the car and yelled at John to drive. Sean loves to mess with people, so we figured he was pulling a joke on us. John told him to shut up and laughed a little. "No, I'm serious," said Sean. He pointed outside the car. We then saw a man walking toward us. Without saying a word, John started the car and drove off. We saw the man sprinting and we pulled away. I didn't get a good look at the man as it was nighttime, but I saw him run to a car and get in as we left the parking lot. John started driving down the road, asking who it was. Sean just said to drive faster as he was following us. The man's car was an old Saturn that was red and kind of beat up looking. We could barely see it, but it started to get closer in our rearview mirror. John started to drive faster, and the car did as well. There wasn't too much traffic on the road, but John started to pass cars left and right, all while the red car remained about 10 car lengths behind us. John then began driving so fast that we went over 100 miles per hour. I remember looking at the dash and seeing 112. We didn't care if we got pulled over because we were being chased by someone. Finally, the car got farther away. John then slowed down really suddenly and took an exit. I thought the car was going to flip the way he pulled off the freeway. The tires skidded and he went under a bridge and then made a U-turn before going back on the freeway the opposite direction. I have to admit, I was pretty impressed with the move. The car lost us, and then we were able to get back on the freeway going the other direction and arrive at our hotel only about 30 minutes late. We finally asked Sean to tell us why the man was chasing him. He said when he got in the bathroom, he saw a man who was smoking and asked Sean if he had any drugs. Sean responded with, "No, I'm not an idiot." The man then got angry and cursed at Sean, and when Sean walked away, he saw the man start to walk after him, which is when he started running. I feel lucky to be alright after that crazy incident. The rest of our time in Cleveland was great, and that was one of the most memorable road trips I've been on so far.
A few years back, I was traveling across the country to visit my parents. This is something that I did all the time. It was a really long drive and usually took me 2 days to get there, but I drive on road trips all the time. I've driven all around the country and have always liked exploring. I usually have always slept in my car as well, and I even lived in my car for a period of almost 6 months at one time, not because I couldn't afford a place, but because it was something I just wanted to do at the time. It was never that difficult for me because I'm a 5'1" female, and the back seats of my 2010 Subaru give me plenty of space to sleep comfortably. On this particular road trip, I was driving from California to Illinois. I usually would take about 3 days to drive there and would stop at rest stops or truck stops to sleep. I was on the first night of the trip and had driven for almost a whole day. It was getting late, probably about 11 p.m., and I found a rest stop and pulled off the road into it. When I got there, I could see it wasn't too busy, but there was a fair amount of people there, mostly a lot of truckers. I found a parking area and parked away from the handful of cars that were there. I was all the way on one end, and I prepared my car for sleeping. I had a system that I would always do, which was to cover all of my windows with blankets or window covers and secure them. I would then get my blankets in the back seat for sleeping. Then I went inside the rest stop building to use the restroom and brush my teeth. When I went inside, I saw there were a few other people there, but not too many with it being late. I wanted to hit the road by 6 a.m. the next morning, so when I got back to my car, I pretty much tried to go right to sleep immediately. I had been tired from all the driving, and within 5 minutes, I was super relaxed and drifted off to sleep. However, I was woken up seemingly not too long after that. I was suddenly wide awake, and I looked around and saw that it was still nighttime. I looked at my phone to see the time, nearly midnight. I hadn't even been asleep for an hour. Then, I thought I heard a very small noise, but I couldn't tell what it was. I was paranoid for some reason. I had slept in my car many times before, but I never felt quite like this. I was completely still and held my breath listening. Then I heard a small noise once again. I was trying to figure out what it was, and then I realized it was my rear passenger's door that my feet were up against, and it was being pulled from the outside. It was as if somebody was trying to open the door very slowly and quietly. I heard it once more, and my heart started pounding. Then, I thought I heard some footsteps, just barely, and everything went quiet. I was still laying there, frozen, not making a sound. Eventually, maybe 2 minutes later, I heard more noise, but this time, somebody tried opening my other rear door where my head was. I very carefully and slowly sat up and then pulled the blanket covering the window to the side just a tiny bit. I saw a man walking from the side of my car towards the front of it away from me. I only saw him from the back, so I didn't know who he was, but I quickly closed the tiny gap I had made and hoped the man was leaving for good. I kept sitting there and listening, but I didn't hear any noises for a while. Just when I was starting to feel a little bit comfortable again, I heard another noise. This time it was coming from my front driver's door. It sounded like the guy was messing around with the lock on my driver's door or something. I knew that all my doors were locked, and I was just hoping that the guy would give up already and go away. I wanted to drive away at this point, and I looked around for my keys, which usually would be in the compartment behind the driver's seat and would be next to me as I slept. In the dark, I had a hard time finding it, and I was also trying to be as quiet as I could. Just then, before I even found my keys, I suddenly heard a click from my driver's door, as if it came unlocked. Then, I watched the door open up. I was horrified. I saw a man begin to enter the car and look right at me. When I saw him, I recognized him. He was one of the people I had seen inside the rest stop when I was in there. When he saw me, he began to come closer, and I went as far back in the corner of my back seat as I could. The man started laughing as he got inside, and then shut the driver's door. I pushed the unlock button on my door and then opened it. I ran out as quick as I could, and I heard the man open his door as well. I went running all the way to the rest stop. I felt the man chasing after me, and he was gaining on me until I got about 50 feet away from the rest stop building. Then he seemed to stop. As soon as I found somebody walking in the rest stop, I ran up to them, and I told them to call the police. Then I went inside. There were not many people inside the rest stop at all anymore at this time, but still enough to make me feel much safer than out at my car. I didn't have my phone with me, or my keys. They were both still inside my car, so I walked up to the front desk of the convenience store area inside the rest stop, and I asked the person working there to call the police. I told them what had happened, and I then waited by the front counter until the police arrived. When they got there, we went back to my car and saw that the man was gone. Luckily, he hadn't stolen any of my stuff, and I provided the police with his description and told them that I had seen him inside in case there were security cameras. After that night, I stayed the next night in a hotel and did the same on the way back. I've slept in my car again since then, but I've been much more careful when I do. A couple of years ago, I took a road trip all by myself out to California. One of my good friends moved out there, and I had never been there before, so I wanted to visit and also see some cool places in California and experience it. I was going to drive there in about 2 days. On the first day, I drove from sun up to sundown and even past that. I stopped a few times for food and stuff, but for the most part, I drove the whole time. I had booked a hotel online, and I had the address of it on my phone. By the time that I was about 30 minutes out from the hotel, it was probably about 10:30 p.m. I knew that I was going to be taking an exit up ahead in like 20 miles or so. As some more time went by, I felt like the exit should be approaching. I looked at my phone to see how close it was, and just as I looked at it, I saw the phone turn off like it had died. I tried turning it back on, but I realized that it was in fact dead. I had a car charger, but it had been having some problems recently at the time. It was one of those old chargers that sometimes it randomly wouldn't work, or you would have to mess around with it a while before it worked. So I got the charger and tried plugging it into the phone and turning it on, but nothing happened. I kept driving and saw some exits coming up. I just guessed that these were the ones that I was supposed to take. I didn't know for sure, but I was hoping that I would be correct. Maybe if I drove down the exit, I would see the hotel or a sign for it or something. So I took the exit and went to the right. I passed by an old gas station, but that was about it. As I continued to drive down this road, things were much quieter there. The roads didn't have any other cars on them at all. I drove along the road for probably 2 or 3 miles. At that point, I realized that I didn't really know where I was going and I had probably taken the wrong exit. I wanted to figure it out though, so I pulled over to the side of the road that I was on. Then I took the charger and tried to figure out what was wrong. I unplugged it, plugged it back in, and started moving it around, trying to get it to work. I sat there in my car for a few minutes trying everything I could to get the charger to charge my phone, but nothing seemed to do it. It seemed as though that charger had finally bit the dust for good. I realized that I would have to buy a new one, but still, I had to get to the hotel and I didn't even know where it was. I remember I looked up though, and suddenly I saw headlights that a car had pulled over to the side of the road behind me. It was several car lengths back, and at first I thought that maybe it was police. But looking at the headlights, it didn't really seem like a police car. Plus, there were no flashing red and blue lights, just normal headlights. I waited for a minute or two to see if anybody would get out or something. They didn't though. Then I decided to merge back onto this quiet road. There were literally no other cars around, just us 2 cars pulled over on the side of the road right here. It was really strange. I didn't know why this person had pulled over, and on both sides of the road it was just wildland and woods. So I put my car in drive and slowly went back out onto the road. When I did, I noticed that almost immediately after me, the car behind me did the same. This gave me a bad feeling. Why would this person want to follow me? I should have turned around and went back to the highway right then and there, but I didn't. The fact that the car behind me left right after me got me distracted. I kept going down that road for a little while, and at the first opportunity to turn that I had, I took it. I wanted to see what the car would do behind me. When I turned, the car did as well. Now I was really worried. I drove down this other random road for a while, and then I turned again. The car behind me did that as well. I really wanted to get away from it. This road was even more secluded though. There were no street lights, and the only visibility was coming from my headlights and the ones of the car following me. I knew that I had to turn around and go back to the highway. It felt really sketchy trying to get away from this guy on these roads, so I decided to make a U-turn. I slowed down and went as far as I could to the right side of the road. The car behind me started to slow down as well. Then I began turning around to make the U-turn. I slowed down significantly more, but I was just able to make it. However, when I turned around, I realized that the car behind me had actually backed up. It was now parked in a way where the car was blocking almost the entire width of the road. I stopped. I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't think I would be able to get around the car. Then the car turned off and I saw the driver's door open up. A man got out. He did not look friendly at all. He started instantly jogging towards my driver's side door. In an instant, I went to the right and just hit the gas. It was really just a reaction to the guy running at me. I drove right into the grass and just barely squeaked around the man's car. Luckily, my car did not get stuck in the grass, and I soon went back onto the road. I saw the guy was running back for his car, so I went faster, and as soon as I made it to the next turn, I took it. Then I took this other road that was right off of that one. I knew the guy would be coming for me, but at the moment, I could not see him. So I went down that road a little ways, and then I pulled over and turned my lights off. I just hoped that the guy wouldn't go down that road. I waited for probably 10 minutes, and I didn't see the car, so he must have not known that I had went down that second road. After that, I carefully drove back towards the highway again. I was able to make it, and then I was able to use the signs to get to the correct exit. I stopped at a gas station, bought a new charger, and then was able to make it to my hotel. Looking back, I don't know who that guy was, why he followed me, or what he wanted. I don't think it was anything good though, and I'm really glad that I got away from him. This is something that happened one time when I was going on a road trip. I was driving really late at night on the highway. So basically, out of nowhere, this car started following me. I don't recall exactly when it started.
I just know that I saw headlights behind me, and I was just driving like normal. But when I got stuck behind a semi-truck, I wasn't really thinking, and I just started going really slow for a long time. The semi was probably going at least 5 miles per hour below the speed limit. Normally, in this kind of a situation, a car would go into the left lane and pass the slower truck, but I was paying more attention to just driving and listening to the radio. I'd been driving for so long that I was just fine with going slow for a while. There really weren't many cars on the road at this time. So I was driving behind the truck for at least 5 minutes, and there was a car also behind me. Then I randomly came to my senses and realized, why are we going so slow? I then changed lanes and went into the left lane. And as soon as I did this, the car behind me did as well, so I noticed that. Then I passed the truck and moved back into the right lane, and the car following me did the same. I did find this odd, but still, nothing really to worry about. But I noticed that the car was following me kind of close. Things remained like this for probably the next 10 minutes. I just had a bad feeling about how close the car was following me, and now I was noticing. Then I approached another semi going slow in the right lane. When I did, this time, I decided to wait back again and see what the car behind me would do. I slowed down and the car behind me did the same. I went slow behind the truck for at least a minute. Then, the same instant that I put my turn signal on and changed lanes, the car behind me did too. After making it around the truck and settling back into the right lane again, the car was still behind me following at the same distance. We drove for a while and I was getting frustrated. I wanted this car to stop following me. That's when I decided to take the next exit and see what would happen. Now, we were kind of in the middle of nowhere, so I was just hoping that there would be a truck stop or some kind of business with people around. Several minutes later, there was an exit, and I took it. The car behind me did as well. I then took a right, but realized that there really didn't seem to be anything over here. It just looked like mostly country land on both sides of the road. I then took my phone out and tried to look up the nearest police station, but I had no service being in the middle of nowhere. So I ended up messing up my directions and losing my map. Meanwhile, I was driving on this quiet road with the car still behind me. I then took another turn, and so did the car following me. After that, I started making random turns, and each time that I did, the car behind me did as well. I really couldn't believe that this car was keeping up with me so well. I continued to take more random turns, and then I realized that I was completely lost. I had no idea how to get back to the highway. At that point, I started trying to figure out how to get back there. I would honestly rather be followed on the highway than some random country roads. At least on the highway, there are some other cars, and I would be able to get to an actual city eventually. So for the next 10 minutes or so, I kept making random turns, but in an effort to find my way back. In the middle of this though, randomly, the car following me took a different turn. I honestly couldn't believe it. I kept going though, and didn't see the car again after that. I continued making turns here and there for a while longer. Then I noticed that I actually had a phone signal again. I put my directions back in, and was soon able to make it back to the highway. Then I continued my drive. For the rest of the way, nothing else like that happened. I don't know why that car was following me. I don't know who it was, and I don't know why they stopped following me. That was my scariest road trip experience though.
I'm a female, and I went to a college that was really far away from where I was from. It was several states away, and every time I went to and from college, it would be a bit of a road trip. One time in particular, I was coming home for the summer. It was a 10-hour drive, and there were actually a couple of times where I did the whole drive in one day, but this time I was going to be making it in 2. I was going to stop at a hotel when it got really late, so that first day, I drove for a really long time until it got late and I couldn't go any further. I was really tired, and it was probably like 11 o'clock. I was still a good 4 hours or so from home, so I decided to stop for some sleep. First though, I went to a gas station. It was a larger one that was probably very common for people on road trips to stop at. There were quite a few trucks parked in the back for the night. I had to use the restroom, so I parked and got out, then went inside of the store. There were a few other people inside, probably on road trips like me. I remember that after using the bathroom, I got an energy drink, and I saw that there was just one person working at the registers. There was a line of a few people waiting to check out. So I got in line, and then I remembered that this one guy got in line behind me. When he did, he tapped me on the shoulder and started talking to me. The guy had sort of long hair, was wearing a hat, and kind of had a gruff look to him. He was holding a six-pack of natural light beer, and after saying hi to me, he asked if I was on a road trip. I said yes, I was going home from college. The man asked me where I was from, and I told him. Then, surprisingly, he asked me if I needed a ride. I said no, and I was confused, because I had literally just told him that I was on a road trip. He continued to talk to me though, asking me several more random questions before it was my turn to check out. After I did, I walked back to my car. I remember that when I got to my car, I noticed the man leaving the store with the beer and cigarettes as well. He walked to this blue, really rusty old pickup truck that was parked sort of far away from my car. I then started up my car to leave, but realized that I was sort of low on gas, so I decided to fill up now so I wouldn't have to do it in the morning. I backed up to an open gas pump and then fueled my car. Afterwards, I drove to a nearby motel. It was just this cheap motel, and it was a pretty short ways down the street. I arrived, checked in, and then got my room key and went to my room and got ready for bed. I remember that right before going to sleep, I decided to check out the front window. It was one of those motels that just has a sidewalk in front of the rooms and then the parking lot is right there. The window was completely covered, but when I moved the cover and I looked out, I saw the rusty blue truck. It was parked just in the parking lot in front of my room. Then I noticed that the same guy was in the driver's seat of it. Maybe this was just a coincidence, but it seemed a little bit strange. I went away from the window, got in bed, and then tried falling asleep. I was pretty tired and was able to fall asleep pretty quickly. But sometime in the night, I woke up. I just remember that after I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed was the sound of somebody trying to open the door to my room. I was suddenly wide awake. The person tried the door a few times and then stopped. After not hearing anything for a few moments, I got up and went over to the door. I looked through the peephole but saw nothing. But I did hear a car door closing a distance away in the parking lot, so I went over and looked out of the window. When I did, I saw that nobody was at the door anymore. Then I looked to the blue truck and saw that the man was inside of it and in the driver's seat. That had to have been him. If he had a room here, why wouldn't he be in it? I went over to the phone in the motel room and I called the front desk, but nobody answered. I was considering calling the police. I went over to the bed and sat down, trying to relax. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning by now. After laying down and going on my phone a little bit, I was starting to feel better. Then, suddenly, I heard a knock at the door. Once again, I was instantly on edge. I listened, and after a few moments, whoever was there knocked again. I quietly got up and walked over to the door. After looking through the peephole, I saw the same man was there. Then, I went back over to the bed and called the police. I told them what was going on. After I was told they were on the way, I hadn't heard the knocking or anything in a few minutes. I went back over to the window and looked out. The man was still there and still inside of his truck. Then I just had to wait for police. I kept watching out the window the entire time. After about 5 minutes or so, I saw a police car entering the parking lot. Right when it did, the truck that the man was in started up and began to drive away. The police car noticed this and put on its flashing lights. They both then drove out of my sight. However, about 10 minutes later, another police officer showed up and knocked on my door. He told me that the police had pursued the rusty truck and stopped it. The man was arrested for drunk driving as well as having other drugs in the car. He denied trying to enter my room, but admitted to knocking on the door. I was just glad that he was off the streets for the night. The next morning, I was able to make it back home. That was definitely my scariest road trip experience.
I used to go on quite a few road trips. I would travel all around the country and was able to actually sleep out of my car. Now, I wasn't living in my car or anything like that. I have a house and had one then too. But my career allows a lot of free time, and my favorite thing to do is travel. When I drive, I'm able to see whatever I want and stop whenever I want to, so I really enjoy it. I save money on hotels and convenience by sleeping in the back of my SUV. I set it up with a small mattress in the back, and 2 of the seats are removed. I have a bunch of blankets and pillows to make it comfortable, and I also have covers for all of the windows. The rest of the space I can store whatever luggage that I have. I usually will park anywhere I can to sleep, and I don't make it obvious that I'm sleeping there. The usual places would be rest stops, large parking lots, or sometimes even the side of a street if there are a bunch of other cars there. It can get a little bit sketchy at times, but I've never actually had a real problem or scary occurrence. But that all changed about 6 months ago. Now, this was my 5th road trip where I would be sleeping in my car. I expected everything to go smoothly as the others had. I was going to be driving a couple of states away, staying there for a few days, and then heading back. The first night, I stayed at a really busy rest stop. The second night, I parked and slept in a Walmart parking lot. And on the third night, I wasn't able to find a decent place right away. I was driving on the road and got tired sort of quickly. I pulled off to search for a place in the area, but it was pretty sparse. There were no Walmarts or anything like that. The only real option that I saw was a rest stop a few miles up the road. I drove there and pulled in, hoping for it to be similar to the one I had stayed at before. But this one was not like it at all. The rest stop was really old and outdated looking. The building was also smaller, and there were like 2 other cars in the parking lot only. The parking lot was pretty big and not well lit. I had a bad feeling, and this is not a place I would normally stay at, but I didn't have much of a choice. I was tired, so I decided that I would make it work. I parked sort of closer to the building and got out to use the bathroom and brush my teeth. After that, I got back inside of my car and got it ready for sleeping. I covered all of my windows from the inside and got my bed set up. This didn't take me too long, maybe 5 to 10 minutes. Then I was ready to go to sleep. Things were very silent as I laid down and closed my eyes. I relaxed and was asleep within minutes. The next thing that I remember is waking up at some time, knowing that it was still night. I heard a noise of somebody walking right outside of my vehicle. I couldn't see anything outside because of my window covers, but I could see a shadow. There looked to be somebody standing right outside of my car on the right side. Then I saw another shadow come into view. Somebody else was there as well. I didn't know why people would be walking so close to my car. I was wide awake now, and my heart started racing. One of the people started walking around my car, and then I heard more footsteps. It seemed as though there were 3 people now walking around it. I was silently waiting for them to leave and wondering what was going on. I looked at my watch, 3 o'clock in the morning. One of the people seemed to head to the back end of my car, and the other 2 went to the front. Then, suddenly, there was a huge loud noise coming from the back. It was like somebody had taken a hammer to my back window. It didn't break, but it was very loud. Then there was another whack, and this time, I heard the window starting to break. I instantly jumped up and found my keys, which I always had right next to me as I slept. I jumped over into the front seat of the car. Without even taking the window cover off, I started the engine. There was another strike to the back of the car, and I heard the window breaking even more. After I started the vehicle, I heard some shouting from outside. I couldn't tell you what was said though. Finally, I took off the first window cover just enough to see. 2 men stood there. I started backing up, and the window was hit again with whatever tool they were using. The other men charged at my car, and after backing up, I saw the other guy, who had been in the back, holding what appeared to be a hammer in his hand. The man was standing just to the left of my car and behind it. He swung the hammer at my back window as I finished backing up. Then, as I started to drive away, he threw the hammer at my car, breaking one of the rear side windows. I sped out of there, leaving all 3 men standing around the space that I had parked at. My heart was racing, and I got onto the road and drove for a while. I was able to compose myself and called the police and told them everything. I drove to a nearby town and got a hotel there for the night. When I looked at my car, there was significant damage to the back and one of the side windows, but luckily, I was not harmed. The police did an investigation to find the guys, but I never heard back if they were found or not.
A few years back, I went on a road trip. I travel quite a bit for work, and I end up driving all around the country. So on this particular road trip, I found myself driving in sort of the middle of nowhere really late at night. I'm pretty good at staying awake and driving at all kinds of hours, but I need the help of caffeine to do so. So when I sensed that I was starting to get a little bit sleepy, I knew that I needed to stop. If I got out of the car, walked around a little, and had a caffeinated beverage, I would be fine. So after driving down the highway for a few more miles,
I saw the sign for a rest stop up ahead. I was happy to see this, and I pulled off. This rest stop was right off the highway, and I mean literally right off of it. The exit went right into the parking lot, and then you had to go back onto the highway. There were no other roads. There was also a small woods in the area of land between the stop and the highway. When I pulled in, I noticed that there were 0 other cars around. The rest stop building was also fairly small. I parked my car right in front of the building, got out, and looked around. It was really dark, but there was one dim street lamp a little ways away. Around the building was a little bit of open grass, and then woods on basically all sides of it. The cool air outside felt refreshing, and after stretching my legs, I walked inside of the rest stop. It was an older building. Inside, there was a small lobby with a vending machine and some maps. The restrooms were straight ahead, and then to the right, there was what appeared to be an old restaurant. It was one of those small pizza places that you would sometimes see in rest stops or travel centers, but it was now abandoned, and it looked like it had been for several years. It was sort of spooky. After briefly looking around inside, I figured that I would get something from the vending machine, but first I went into the restroom and used it. While I was in there, I heard footsteps outside in the lobby of the rest stop building. I figured somebody else had stopped. The person did not enter the restroom though. When I came out of the restroom like 30 seconds later, I didn't see anybody. I went over to the vending machine, got a drink, and then casually walked around a little. I looked out the window and then noticed that my car was still the only one in the entire parking lot. This was strange. I was sure that I heard somebody else inside the building, but where would they have come from? I walked over to the abandoned restaurant, and when I did, I thought I saw somebody moving quickly behind the old counter. It was really dark over there, so I didn't see well. But if somebody was over there and seemingly hiding, I didn't want to get involved. I decided at that point to just leave. So I turned and I started walking for the doors. When I was almost there though, I heard footsteps behind me, like whoever was back there was now leaving as well. After I got out of the doors and was approaching my car, I heard the person leave as well, and they seemed to be moving quickly. I stopped and turned around to look at them. It was a man. He was pretty thin, but kind of tall. He was really creepy looking and had long stringy hair. The guy was headed right towards me and approaching in a really aggressive way. I wouldn't be able to get inside my car on time before he reached me, so I decided to just run. I turned and I just sprinted through the parking lot. I ran all the way to the other side. At first, the guy started chasing after me, but he soon stopped. When I got to the far end of the parking lot, I turned around and I looked. The man was standing right next to my car. I couldn't go back to it. I kept walking, and then I went into the grass. Then I entered the woods. I just wanted to get out of the guy's view. After walking through the thick woods for a little while, I called 911. After speaking with the operator, I told them my location and what was going on. Then I waited. I could not see the guy from where I was because I was that deep in the woods. Finally, I could sort of see flashing red and blue lights. I came out from the woods and I saw a police car next to my car. An officer left his vehicle and started walking behind the building. After a while, he came back over to me. He said that when he got there, he thought he saw somebody running behind the building. He went back there though and couldn't find the person. He figured they were deep in the woods by then. I talked to him about the situation. He said that he would call another nearby unit and they would check behind the building again, but that I could go. So after that, I was on my way. I'm not sure if the police found the man or not. I'm guessing that he was going to try to steal my car, but who knows? I'm really glad that I got away from him.
This happened about 5 years ago. I was on a road trip with my friend Justin. We were traveling back home from a convention in a city about 8 hours away from the city where we lived. We drove home, but about halfway through the trip, with about 4 hours left to go, a really bad snowstorm started to hit. With it being nighttime, we decided to find a hotel and be safe, instead of trying to power through it. It was only about 7 p.m. when we checked into the closest decent hotel that we could find. And once we were there, Justin suggested that we see if there was anything to do close by. And when I say close by, I mean within just about a walking distance, because we didn't want to have to drive out in that weather. When we looked, we saw that there was a bowling alley right down the street. We both left out into the blizzard to go to the bowling alley, It seemed like a fun thing to do for a few hours while we were stranded in the city for the night. When we arrived at the bowling alley, we couldn't tell if it was open or not. There weren't really many cars in the parking lot or visible lights on, but we figured not many people were there due to the snowstorm. Justin tried the door, and sure enough it was unlocked, so we went inside to check it out. As soon as we got inside, we could see that it wasn't the nicest of bowling alleys. It seemed sort of old and nobody else was there at all. Some of the lights were on and others were off. It was an eerie feeling overall. We looked to the counter, but nobody was behind it. The place had to be closed, but why was the door left unlocked? We wandered around a little bit out of curiosity. The place definitely seemed to be closed, so we figured we should probably just leave. But then we heard some noise coming from a back room behind the counter. I thought maybe someone was working after all. I walked over to the counter to see if there was anybody there. But as I got closer, I noticed there was a door behind that was open, leading to another room. I looked in and saw inside the room around the corner there were about 5 men who were sitting at a table. They looked really surprised to see me. One of them started to get up. None of the men appeared to work at the bowling alley, and I got a strong urge to leave. I kind of backed away, and then I quickly walked over to Justin and said, "Let's go." He followed, and we both left the building at a rather fast pace. We ran in the snow all the way back to our hotel and got inside. We didn't know who those men were or what they were doing, but the next days we were finally able to get back on the road and drive home. We noticed a car seemed to be following us. No matter what we did, the car would appear behind us. At times, we would seem to lose it, and we wouldn't see it for a while, but it would always return. We got home safely, but the next day as I was driving, I noticed that same car following me as well. It followed me around that day, but after that day, I never saw it again, and beyond that, nothing else happened. I just wonder sometimes if those two things were linked, and who it was who followed us.